The Considered Life by Stefan Boublil. Chapter 11. Design. I never thought, ever since I expressed the unavoidable wish to become a fireman and veterinarian concurrently, that vocations as hailed as architecture and design would ever figure on my list of things to do. What I knew was that I loved the meaningful ramifications of stories told near and far, and it dawned on me one lonely day that stories are actually first and foremost told by the things we humans choose to surround ourselves with. Our houses, modes of transportation, salt and pepper shakers, phones and shoes, dressing up our introduction to an unsuspecting world. Indeed, as consumers, we select what populates our shelves, closets, and glove compartments based on a variety of reasons both arbitrary and rational. But we must not forget that it all resulted from decisions considered by people just like us. Designers, based on a variety of reasons also, both arbitrary and rational. To a handful of practical purists, design was meant to serve people, make life easier, not simply better looking. It might be surprising to some, but designers mostly put more than a fleeting thought into the often lauded endeavor of contributing to mankind through the production of objects large and small. And when they succeed, the results do not need explanations, narrative, or descriptive tags. They tell their stories in how they work, in what they do, in what they are. And the prize is not fame, fortune, or blog hits, but the betterment of society through what might have been perceived at first as a peculiar placement for a handle on a cup, but which ended up changing the way it was held, hence enjoyed, hence remembered. Such minute changes, chaos theory tells us, can have monumental consequences, with such potential power in the balance. Why then do so many companies manufacture doodads, not because they have found a better way, but predictably to move as much product as possible? Discovering that a particular object, which I might have bought because it looked nice, actually suits my life best because its designer considered its interaction with me and or my context is truly remarkable, and in this day and age of increased disposability, not to be taken for granted. We used to design things because we needed the extra or new functionality. I'm talking wheel here, fire, cave door, tic-tac-toe. It used to be that function led to form, which led to meaning. It used to be an industry of need, which has slowly degraded into an industry of want. Iterating one idea until it found its perfect configuration used to be the rule, not the exception. But with industry comes competition, and with competition comes greed. And with greed, priorities change from what is better to how many more can we sell. That is why design has been overtaken by the requirements of marketable beauty, to the detriment of what design should actually be about, what it is about, how things work, matters of inventory notwithstanding. Since there is not one aspect of the human experience untouched by design, since everything we do, everything we wear, everything we put in our bodies, everything we use, from letter-sized paper, a gift from the Dutch, to spaceships, thank you Russia, to everything in between, was once on a designer's to-do list, we must ponder if we too can be willfully designed. Not in any sort by our parents or some supernatural intelligence, but rather by ourselves, for the purpose of accurate representation. That realization, that each day's decisions are in fact part of a larger process, was my impetus to start my own journey into the world of design. My company, The Apartment, was born from a thirst I felt to curate my life, not with things, but rather the emotions they carry that together make a whole. I was never all that interested in collections of objects, a reaction to the nonsensical argument we all heard in college that he with the most toys wins. I was instead captivated by the stories they could tell, alone or together, how they could enrich the human experience. The best day I ever had when we operated a retail store in downtown Manhattan was when a family of 3 came in, a man, his wife, and their kid. Because we always had loud music on and it was so good, they started dancing in the middle of the selling floor on that busy Saturday afternoon. Unsolicited, unashamed, undisturbed. They didn't buy anything, just danced. The environment we had created had made them feel comfortable enough to lose their inhibitions for a moment and do what felt natural. Our platform made it possible to trigger a very simple and human emotion. The apartment design store, in fact, urged me to pay attention to my needs, to examine my wants, and eventually it would prompt the considered life. I thought about the store's inventory and display in a very selfish way. This is what I want to see every day. This is my storyline. This is the toothpaste I use. This is the music I listen to. These are the movies I watch. And these are the chairs I find comfortable. What if I arranged them in a place that feels like an apartment? A place I would want to live in, and see if such a specific assemblage resonates with others. It turned out that it did, if only because the whole was greater than the sum of its parts. It was, ultimately, the simulacrum of life that got people's imagination running, that got those people dancing and the cash registers, eventually, ringing. I began to understand that what was really important to them, and to me, was the authenticity we provided, not so much the chairs or the toothpaste. It led me to understand that designing purposefully for myself yielded better results for others than if I had wandered all along what they might have wanted. Could I not apply this very principle to life itself and everything in it? Could I not judiciously select a belief system that was different than the one handed to me? Could I not invent a career that, upon observation, took advantage of all that I enjoyed instead of following the path laid before me by previous choices? Could I not purposefully design my life as I had designed my store? The answer may seem an obvious yes in hindsight, but it is hard to overestimate how bad a habit it has become for all of us to think ourselves locked into the way things have been done, as opposed to imagining the way they could be. We have been told by religions, teachers, and co-workers about a certain truth we should adhere to, lest we be left behind. And so we wait, not wanting to believe that the reason we invent high-grade concepts such as freedom and existentialism is, to the chagrin of overthinkers, to simply make ourselves feel better. It feels funny to say, but civilization has so far seemed like an obstacle to progress, to the careful examination of one's life in order not to adopt but create our own processes. We must be impolite. We must refuse the generous offerings of the past. We must throw away the old models and become again the designer of our lives. A life considered is, by definition, a journey with no end. In 2006, the late Sir Edmund Hillary was talking about being the first to climb Mount Everest in the 1950s and said that he thought, quote, "The whole attitude towards climbing has become rather horrifying. People just want to get to the top," unquote. How brilliant that even a pioneer thought this casually of his accomplished goal. Certainly, from phone carrier to lifelong mate, the choices I have made have had an impact beyond rollover minutes or capacity for love. The choices I and we make are actually a form of expression. Upon this realization, design became a tool, no longer a profession. It may seem simplistic, but when is the last time design consciously figured into your decision-making? As a matter of function, neither aesthetic nor status-based. Think about your life, all of it. Have you filled it with art? With towels? Have you built a room for your daughter who only visits on weekends that meets the demands of a 14-year-old girl and not simply those of a 48-year-old divorcee? Do you understand who she is, how she lives? Do you actually know how she spends her days, evenings, and nights beyond the routine? Do you know what she thinks of you, what you of her, and how you both came to those temporary conclusions? Do you realize what you do from the time you get up in the morning to the time you go to bed? Do you remember your dreams, sleeping or waking? Do you know what you're scared of, who you love, and why? Have you ever afforded yourself the time to think about yourself? More akin to sociological investigation than interior design, these are some of the questions that must be asked before wondering about any cushion patterns or door handle finishes. Making things beautiful is easy. The tools and objects are out there and available to mix and match with a modicum of taste or not at all. What is much harder is to make things meaningful, an outcome for which interest, care, and would you believe it, consideration are the necessary components. The intents and effects of design should be human in kind. They should neither simply care for beauty nor just assume functionality based on a list of features and specifications, but be about what is actually done with the product in hand. That is why the iPod, as the surely unexpected example, is such a success. because contrary to popular belief, it is not an electronic product, nor even a music product, but a mood product. Music happens to have the power to make or change our day. And the ability to harness such supernatural power in a personal way is an experience we felt with the Sony Walkman when it came out. Something none of us will ever forget, and not just because of the orange headphone pads. "Take this orchestra out of my head" is how I remember my meeting with it in the summer of '79, after my dad's friend had brought one of the very first, fresh off the assembly line, back from a fortuitously timed trip to the Japanese capital. The iPod replicates that exploit in the simplest possible way for the digital era. With only an opposable thumb, eyes, and ears, we can feel the impact desired by the musician. And that is what the iPod experience is about, eliciting an emotional response as quickly as needed. That is good design. Similarly, at the architectural level, there is a vast difference between a house and a home. A house is something you buy, a vulgar array of square feet priced for your desire. A home is a metaphorical place to which you bring the memories of the past in order to found a present and the hope to build the future. That is the real use, not the mere supply of adequate space for furniture and drapes, and why the job of the architect is to feel for the people for whom they provide walls. Why the architect must be the client in that relationship, not the other way around. Architecture has always been loud and arrogant, and it will thankfully continue to be so, but it needs to find a more thoughtful road to get there. Why are so many buildings still only apparently fashioned to the glory of their star conceivers? Do they think of use at all? Or is the brief to design skylines that neatly fill oversized spreads in coffee table books? We have made a rather definitive choice in the way we first worlders have chosen to live. Indoors, because we cannot stand the harsh winters and have gotten used to temperate ease in the summers. Comfort being our first priority. The same reason we fill our supermarkets with food in quantities we cannot possibly consume and fill our homes with things that need us more than we need them. Architects are complicit in such waste, and it is astounding to me how little care for the living they too often exhibit. And I'm not talking only about the weird or flagship projects, the one that have us specialists climaxing in our pants for a news cycle or two. Actually, I would point my finger more angrily to those who feel that nothing special needs to be done with this project, nothing fancy. The architects, tasked by virtue of coastal popularity, to create in cities that can only be described as cages on top of each other so they may fit everyone, eventually scraping the skies, housing people in cubes barely suitable for hamsters, should have been the ones raising a warning flag and not a T-square. Sure, ever since the social contract we all ignored in order to go on with our lives, property has gained value, and far from me to deny people the right to live better when they can afford more. But what of understanding basic human behavior when building for the basic human in all of us? What of the respect we owe each other and ourselves? It is the architect's duty to provide us with a home that, even if temporary and not strictly made to accommodate you, should at least be adaptive to our species, don't you think? I do. But more often than not, especially perusing the rental listings in New York City, you realize that duty has been all but forgotten. Much like physicians, the architect's oath should begin with first, do no harm, and be fulfilled with the designs of structures that consider humanity first, not dollars per square foot. Rem Koolhaas, the famed for good reason Dutch architect, once started an interview with, "If you are some kind of normal person," which, to some extent, I am, and went on to describe the reasons for his artistic collaborations with Prada, which is neither here nor there. What fascinates me in that introduction is the use of "to some extent." Exactly. We are all persons, to some extent, each mostly made from the same stuff, if differently parsed, in 6,602,224,175 different ways, to be precise. Not all of us will design well, that's not the point. Excellence as defined by others is not at issue. Commitment is. Which is why we must learn to be comfortable with our own shortcomings as we strive to do better every day. Fairy tales of impossible is nothing are for sneaker billboards, not life. We have come to believe that anything less than what we have been told represents greatness is surrender. It is not. It is life. Life is messy, unpredictable, and not as exceptional as we are told it should be. And it is just fine the way it is. Sure, it could use some extra reflection, maybe additional trees, certainly more cowbell, but really, it's fine. To believe this is the only way to understand that failures are important, that catastrophe is powerful, that #fail is good. Even though we may spend a tremendous amount of time choosing and deciding, our decisions and choices might be wrong, may be completely flawed, because we are, inherently. That is why the simple ability to make a choice and the willingness to do so is more important than making the right choice. An elusive, subjective concept at best, and further proof of the tyranny of compliance at worst. We have no idea what is right for us and are lectured every day by the sultans of taste who teach us little about how to look at the world and instead spend hours, days, decades painting it in their favorite colors and putting up ugly-ass curtains in our bedrooms. What a waste of everybody's time. To help not with advice on what to do but how to see is unfortunately a mission that designers and architects have given up on. The chair is a good example. I am always fascinated by designers who think they have something to add to the chair. Really? 4 legs, a seat, a back? Will the world not be able to move on to more pressing matters until all designers have given us their version of that apparently unperfectible object? Perhaps, but I cannot help but be a bit sad when the need to clothe, bathe, feed, house, and connect entire populations who still, to this day, cannot do so by themselves is more critical than ever. The only course of action left, to my mind, is now protection from the consequences of our inability to act. Protection from the elements, as they will eventually crush our continents, our cities, our comforts. Protection from our gluttony as the food supply shrinks. Protection from each other as desired living areas become scarce and we have to fight for space, as is already happening in the East Village. What an opportunity for design! A chair is not what I need. The next step in the evolution of human living, the understanding of who we have become, for better and worse, the end of complacency and commiseration. These are what I need. Where is the designer who is working on a better nail, or a better screw, or a better way to synthesize lumber so that we may not have to deforest our planet to provide housing? Where is the engineer continuously searching for better ways to cool a space other than by forcing Freon through a vent? Who is looking at the future of clothing, not clothes? Nobody. With a few obligatory exceptions, few are looking at these issues because they are not sexy, not worth the press. Because of economic circumstance and because of the aforementioned toys race, we do not pay any mind to products that have already been considered once and never again. From the nail to the Constitution, for some reason, we hold these truths to be inalienable, and we do not see fit to change them. Why are the basic things of life not allowed to evolve with us? We matured from ape to Australopithecus, to Cro-Magnon, to modern man, and will to whatever comes next, yet we haven't switched most of our tools. The thing is, we are progressing a lot faster than we used to. There have been more advances in the last 100 years than there have been in the previous million. We move ahead so fast these days, yet still seem to concentrate on things that make us neither happy nor more efficient. Why there are more scientists studying the sexual life of bees than those studying cancer is beyond me. That's probably not actually true, by the way. I haven't checked, but it feels true. There is a reason why it is called progress, in that each step must be ostensibly better than the one before, not merely commentary. Have we done that? Ironically, the allure of creation once felt, which got us into this mess in the first place, is probably what we need to get started again. The need to create, not recreate, not reinvent, but invent. We need to put ourselves in danger, to feel uncomfortable again, to take leaps without knowing whether there is sure footing on the other side, to bet the farm on ourselves as a species, on the fact that we will survive. How can we attempt such work when we spend time and resources on designing another ironic take on the mug every year, all over the world? The answer is simple. We cannot. And that's because, simply put, we do not care enough. Admit it to yourself. It's okay. I don't care enough either. As Salieri utters in Peter Schaeffer's Amadeus to a priest whom he feels is less than he purports to be, I will speak for you, Father. I speak for all mediocrities in the world. I am their champion. I am their patron saint. I think it is more than adequate to confess to one's own unremarkability, for it is not what we do, but rather who we are or have become that is less than exceptional. With such acknowledgement, we can tackle anything. The big problems, the small problems, and design is at the source of every decision made to that effect. Not for beauty, but assistance. About his citrus juicer, the Juicy Salif, somebody once challenged Philippe Starck, specifically about usability. He said, I'm paraphrasing, well, that's not really why I designed it. I designed it because one day it will probably be a gift that a son-in-law gives to his girlfriend's mother. And they really haven't talked a lot before because they don't have all that much in common. She probably thinks he's a slacker. He thinks she's a mom. But he will give her the juicer as a gift to be polite at some kind of event. She will open it in the kitchen and they will put it up on the counter. And she will politely exclaim, wow, this is interesting. What is it? And they are going to talk about it. That juicer is going to make a conversation happen. About a juicer at first, granted, but a conversation nonetheless, which may be the beginning of a relationship that needed a starting point. Design works when it enhances my life as a human being, not just when it enhances my consumerism. Generosity must be taught at architecture and design schools, along with digitally generated morphology and sensory awareness. Designers, in that their task is expressly defined by use, should be more preoccupied than most by such deliberate philanthropy. There is something about designing products and providing housing for humans that, at some level, must be compassionate, must accommodate the needs of people. If not, we should make art, engage people in conversations, controversial and otherwise, instead of attempting to house them. But if we make a fork, why make it harder for it to pick into a bit of meat? Why make it harder for a plate to be washed? Why build obsolescence into an electronic product? I know, because our designer's brief within a capitalist system also calls for increased consumption. And if the products we design last or are too useful, people will not buy any more and keep what they have longer because it works better. Can you imagine that? A world in which every single product is made to the best quality standards available. The free market might crumble. So who is to blame for the systematic and willful abolition of daily quality? Well, that's the rub, isn't it? We are. We made this system what it is. We understood its rules, the sacrifices and rewards, and agreed to them. Whether it is a perversion of what was originally intended or not, who cares? Intentions don't matter, only actions do. And the proof seems to be in the pudding. This is why we are here, sadly, to produce. If we want to be as useful as we think we are, we need to start designing and producing for ourselves, not for the world, which will follow in our path once we have made things of value. But for now, we must be selfish and realize that we are not what we believe ourselves to be. We certainly cannot afford to be generous with the world. We need our own attention too much. The world will be fine. We will not. Beyond homes and toothbrushes, designing your life should be the first step you take after considering it, that which allows subjectivity to test itself out by either adding or subtracting portions missing or unnecessary. Design is not style, form, or industry, and I cannot even bring myself to use it as a noun. It is a verb, calling us to deliberately adapt, invent, and produce the rest of our lives. Let's get to it.